Hi, this is Patty Casper, your FASD coach. So, welcome to another free Friday Tidbit. And today I thought I would bring to you a couple of the cognitive tasks that underlie the behavior of communication, right? The struggles that many of us face with language and communication. And it's interesting to note that several of these pieces around the whole topic of language and communication are the same symptoms, if you will, that we would see, or the same characteristics that we would see with other more commonly used diagnoses, such as autism or ADHD. And there's reasons for that, right? All of these things are different areas of neurodivergence. So we only have one brain, and we come up with different labels based on which pieces we're seeing and also our familiarity with all the different types of neurodivergence. So the first one I wanted to talk about tonight was difficulty word finding when those words happen to describe emotions. So FASD does not happen in a vacuum, right? Alcohol and drug exposure, trauma, none of those things happen in a vacuum. So oftentimes there are other things going on at the same time that exacerbate everything. And for instance, if we have a family that really struggles with family dysfunction, right? I don't like that term, but I'll use it just because most people are familiar with it. When there are family dysfunctions, there's usually something going on with different attachment patterns between each generation, right? And so a lot of times, children learn that it is not safe to feel things because they cannot trust their grown-ups to respond in a supportive way. And so they actually learn to divorce themselves from their emotional world. So if, and this is just one explanation, but if this has happened, then basically that really contributes a lot to a struggle to come up with the right word to describe a feeling. Feelings are very nuanced, right? We know anger, we know sadness, we know happy, but there's a whole lot more nuances or shades of meaning than just those three, right? So if we are, for whatever reason, not in touch with our feeling states, we're really going to struggle when it comes to finding words that accurately describe all those subtle differences between emotions. So that's one thing to think about. Is the child that you're caring for, was he or she, in foster care? Was he or she adopted? If so, there's a lot of trauma going on. There's a lot of family dysfunction that this might be the explanation for you. Another thing I wanted to talk about today is not seeming to get it, right? And not following along in a conversation very well. Perhaps being very chatty and talkative, but being off topic a lot. Both of those things come back to comprehension. So there's several different regions of the brain that deal with language. There's one part of the brain that deals with hearing it. There's another part that deals with seeing the words. There's another part that deals with what do those things mean. Another part that assigns, that helps figure out what am I going to say next. And then all those nerve signals get set over to another one that actually controls the speech, right? To give an answer to something. So that's a set of signals that are basically going all around the brain to different parts. One thing to keep in mind with FASD is that alcohol and other substances and trauma as well, but particularly alcohol, can really damage the structure in the brain, those neural highways. And so maybe those links aren't connecting. And maybe because the brain is adaptive, right? Detours were built, but those detours are not necessarily the most efficient way for a signal to get from point A to point B. And you know this yourselves from driving in through a construction zone, right? The route you're used to taking, it's what you've always taken, and because it's the most efficient. But if they're closed, if that road is closed because of, whatever, this time of year, maybe it's because of flooding with all the rain that we've been having in my part of California. That's kind of where my mind went. But we've all been through that frustration when we're in a hurry to get somewhere and there's a detour sign up. And maybe that detour takes us through a part of town that we're not familiar with. Our anxiety gets up. When our anxiety is increased, we have trouble tapping into the thinking part of our brain. We have trouble tapping into the communication part of our brain, right? We have struggles with finding words. We have struggles to remember, definitions and things, all that kind of thing. So you can see this is a very complicated situation. So often, as with everything else I'll be talking to you with Free Friday Tidbits, our brains are so complex and so complicated, and we take them for granted, right? We take them for granted. But if we're talking about prenatal exposures to toxins, whether it be drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or whatever the case is, those substances damage the developing brain. So we have to remember that, someone's doing the best they can, right? There are things that impacted in the moment, such as being stressed and anxious, like I mentioned, but there's other things that are always going to be a struggle for us, and we have to create workarounds. So those were the things I really wanted to talk about today. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is something that is a common characteristic with autism, and that is the difficulty in reading and responding to facial language, body language, tone, all those kinds of nonverbal things. Because really, with communication, a very small percentage of what we communicate is communicated through our words. Most of it, we read people's eyes, right? And know whether or not we can trust someone because of their eyes. We read their tone of voice, the inflections they use, the speed that they use. I mean, if someone talks like this, you can pretty much guarantee they're nervous. They're very nervous, right? A lot of times, the parts of the brain that are in charge of sorting out all those signals are damaged. So it's a struggle for a lot of people, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of support to get those things right. And really, for the people in our child's life, or, if we're the ones like me, we're the ones living with FASD, it's something that the people in my world, right, need to understand. That sometimes we're just a little off, and it's not because we're dumb, we're stupid, we're mean, we don't care, right? It just is what it is, because our challenges are biologically based. They're not things we can do anything about. You cannot undo damage to the brain that was caused prenatally. What you can do is figure out some accommodations or workarounds, right? But that's what I'm here for. That's why I'm your FASD coach. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a terrific week. And I will see you next Friday. It's April. We have a new monthly topic, right? And it's one that's kind of slide us from communication into processing pace, which is another huge topic. So have a great week. Enjoy your weekend. I hope it is fantastic, and I'll see you next Friday. Okay? Bye, everyone.